business climate, how this climate is assessed by small and medium-sized business. And we can show some legislation that is adopted by the Supreme Council, but at the end, this is transformed in the climate for business, how the business feels in these conditions. About the content of the assessment, we call it ABCA, ABCA, and this instrument is basically the way how to assess business climate through the feeling of small and medium-sized business, how they assess the number of obstacles. And we want this instrument to be a regular instrument of assessment of climate, and how this instrument corresponds to the doing business rating. This instrument is different from doing business because doing business is a company that is artificially structured, and the problems they face, our index, my colleagues are going to tell you about. The ABCA is the feeling and the results of survey among businessmen, prioritization of the problems. And this assessment will be carried out annually, and we will see changes in our regulatory environment. Our product is basically one of several in our rank. So this is, we also prepared several reports on trust to the state and the problems exporters face in the sphere of small and medium-sized business. And this product will be presented to you by my colleagues. This is Oksana Kuziakiv, coordinator at the USAID LEV program, executive director of the Institute of Economic Research, Artur Kovalchuk, USAID level program researcher at the Institute of Economic Research, and Andriy Butin, also expert of USAID, the senior researcher at the Institute of Economic Research. And I would like to thank USAID and other partners who help us to carry out the study. And I would like to say that at this presentation of our report, also Tamara Selyanek is present. She is the head of the program. And if you have questions about the directions of the activity of the program, that are the problems outside of this product, so you can ask her. So we start our work, and the floor is given to Oksana Kuziakiv to briefly outline the assessment and how the climate is assessed by medium-sized and small business, please. Thank you. We present the assessment of business climate today. This is called ABAC, and this is based on the assessment and feelings of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs. So we surveyed 1,835 representatives of small and medium-sized business who represent all the regions of Ukraine except occupied territories of Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast and except Autonomous Republic of Crimea. Among our respondents, there are physical persons, entrepreneurs, and also legal persons. 1,325 legal persons, 502 respondents are physical persons, entrepreneurs. Before starting the presentation, I would like to tell two important things. So by this product, we create a system of indicators. We will monitor the business climate for the next 4 years, and we use two basic notions. The first one is value of regulation, the cost of regulation. We calculated it through our research, and this is important indicator. What is it? This is the sum of funds in money equivalent that the entrepreneurs spend in order to adhere to legislation, and this cost is direct and indirect. Direct cost is the cost that is directly spent by the entrepreneur in the money equivalent, and the part of resources that get to the state budget, these duties and different types of this is paid officially. And the second part, and we know it, is that our entrepreneurs pay as bribes or some contributions. This is the burden for them, and this is not official part. And indirect spending, we take into account these are time and that they spend in according to current legislation. So it is connected with the regulation multiplied by average salary. So we will operate with these indicators. And the second components and indicators we're going to speak about are indices. So these will help us to get the temperature of the business climate and how it changes. We use balance indices and index, and so business tendencies survey, you can put it like this. So this is -1 to +1. -1 is bad and +1 is good, and 0 is the breaking point where the tendency changes. So whether it will be good or bad in some time. So what are the indices? What are the results? So the main index is estimated starting from -1 to +1. According to 2015 results, it is 1 point. It is close to the to 0, and it shows that it's not that bad if we think. So our assessment is in the positive, but we see a great difference between 0 and 1, between 0.01, and we have prospects before us for Ukrainian reforms in order to improve business climate. And what influenced and what are the components of this indicator? Here we have 4 components, and 2 of them are worse, and you may see it on this graph. And this is the assessment of current business situation and the short-term prospects of the system. So 0.26, and this is not good, the second indicator, that also have minus, but it is close to 0, is expectations as to the change in short-term perspective of the business situation. So the business situation, the financial economic situation at the enterprise, this is the derivant of the business climate on the whole, and it creates our welfare. So this indicator is minus 0.04. So it is a little bit better. The expectations are better, but these are 2 indicators that are negative. 2 important aspects that provide us with some kind of optimism. These are in this index that concerning long-term prospects in the change of economic situation, and this is 0.17. And if we look at long-term prospects, I may say that 53% of those surveyed, they say that in 2 years they plan to broaden their activity or to increase their activity in their enterprise, and only 8% plan to decrease. 39 remains the same. So 0.44 is one of the main indicators that can be expected. And also the second from positive ones, it is.
So the first component, this is dynamics in business environment. This dynamics allows us to judge what was good, what was bad during the reporting period. This index equals to 0.17. This is again a rating which adds optimism. What makes obstacles to the operations of small SMEs? We have a long list of 22 obstacles. Some 30 obstacles were not classified. So the biggest obstacles were related to outside the geopolitical factors, like unstable political situation. By the way, the survey was carried out in late 2015, early 2016. This was a stormy time when there was instability in the government, and this immediately influenced business environment. And the second economic obstacle is low demand. The third negative factor is high taxes. This is more important for legal entities, while physical entities are under umbrella of simplified taxation. Then inflation and the warfare in the East. On the seventh place is corruption, and the eighth position is occupied by the instability of legislation. These were 8 major factors. This what limited business development last year. We tried to sum up all those factors in groups, and this allowed us to describe these 10 major challenges for Ukrainian business. And we clearly see that the war and unstable situation are the unstable political situation were the major factors that contributed to vague business environment. The second position in this among these challenges is occupied by taxes and administering of taxes against the background of frequent changes in legislation. The third factor is driven by unfavorable economic conditions like low demand and high inflation. The next factor is corruption and insufficient regulation. Before describing the cost of regulation compliance, I will come back to the regulatory environment business. It covers all spheres of regulations like licensing, import, export operations, etc. And 16, the biggest progress was made as to the registration of new enterprises, which shows that the governmental effort on simplifying business registration was felt by business and very considerable progress was reached in the situation with inspections. This is a direct reflection on the monitoring. Very small improvements are all spheres of regulation except construction and making new constructions operational. So the regulatory costs in MSCs amounts to the average value of compliance costs amounts to 29,760 hryvnia. So this is about those enterprises which covered licensing, sanitary permits, etc. This does not include tax compliance. Tax compliance is a rather big burden, and it directly depends on the size of enterprise. The bigger the company, the bigger is the burden. The smaller is the company, the bigger is the burden of tax compliance. Micro businesses has the biggest cost, compliance cost. As for the sectors, as for the areas in the regulation, this is about registration. We asked our respondents about time spent for registration, and you clearly see red and blue lines on our graph. What remained unchanged? The share of those who used unofficial payments, it still persists, and we need to understand why. We decrease time, we decrease the legal requirements, but the share of those who tends to do everything unofficially do not drop. This is a question. And inspections, another area where we witnessed the progress. The progress was gained due to a general moratorium on inspections. 53% of respondents stated that they had less problems than 3 years ago. But despite that moratorium, 22 respondents had an experience of inspections during 2015. This was the state fire inspection, which became the leader instead of tax inspection. Also, the sanitary inspection carried out some inspections. These very inspections, which I just mentioned, these were the longest inspections. They were very costly inspections. You can see that line on graph. The longest red line. In average, each inspection takes 14 days, and companies spend around 30% 30,000 or even up to 40,000 with unofficial payments. Many companies mentioned that they had fines in result of the inspections, and a lesser number of companies mentioned about confiscations in result of inspections. As for administering of taxes, this used to be a considerable obstacle for enterprises. In our survey, we tried to understand what is the biggest obstacle in tax administering. We revealed that instability in tax legislation is the biggest problem. For legal entities, all the tax administration changes are more visual, are more strong than for strong enterprises. So, this again proves that simplified system, despite all the criticism, nevertheless properly protects that part of business which otherwise would be the mostly damaged by the frequent changes in tax legislation. For those companies which are not subject to simplified taxation, for them unpredictability in frequent changes of tax legislation is a big problem. They cannot predict their costs. And about regulatory climate, once more about corruption. Corruption actually is the component which penetrates everywhere. Whether it is a problem or the way to resolve problems, from the society point of view, this is a problem. But for business, it's the way to evade from excessive regulation. The most frequent among corruption were making newly developed premises operational, so bring new developments into operation. And in this area, 24% of respondents informed about bribes. As for the inspections, just 6% paid bribes. The biggest majority mentioned that this shadow sector creates non-competitive environment for others, but at the same time, 53% of respondents believe that entrepreneurs pay bribes to prevent inspections. And to sum up, I would like to look at the business to government, business to power relations. There should be trust. On the one hand, 89% believe that the government the state is either an enemy or the opponent. At the same time, the same 80% believe that the state should support them. And the majority of entrepreneurs could not mention specific state borders which they do not like. So the biggest problem is a person of a bureaucrat. So the biggest problem for business is when business contacts with the government, he faces that old-fashioned bureaucrats. So the public policy elements to support MSC's development should be as follows. A simplification of tax administration and financial accounting in the companies. 70% of respondents insisted on this. The second aspect is deregulation, which means for entrepreneurs cutting down of documents necessary for entrepreneurial activity. Then the third step should be establishing or creating a unified informational portal for MSCs. How to start business, how to run it. The fourth step should be reforming of the tax service. It should be a service for honest taxpayers. And the number 5 is digitization of the part of administrative services. That is on what SMEs expect from state, from bodies. Thank you, Oksana, for your interesting presentation. Of course, some entrepreneurs do not like the state. On the other hand, they wish to get support from the state. There are some other disputable things which we will discuss in course of our discussion. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Artur Kovalchuk to present the face of the SMEs. We tried to understand the quality characteristics of SMEs. Who are those people? Who are those companies who are those sectors? One of the major sources of information about SMEs development in Ukraine is State Statistics Service. But in order to understand the SME sector in more detail, to understand the expectations of SMEs for the future, and to be able to look to the future, we can conduct a survey. The annual business environment, the annual business climate assessment revealed the following findings. The average age of entrepreneurs amounts to 45 years of age. This is the category of population which entails some specific business style and experience. Speaking about gender aspects, we identified that in gender aspect it's almost equal. 51% of men and 49% of women in business sector. As for sectoral split of SMEs, we can say that this is retail. This is about physical persons. As for legal entities, they amount to majority in industrial manufacturing. We try to understand in which sectors they work and what are their markets where they operate. The overwhelming majority of domestic SMEs are concentrated, are focused on the regional or local markets, and only 9% of respondents are exporters. Nevertheless, almost the half of our respondents are planning to target bigger markets, that is from regional level to national level, or from national level to go abroad. Such extension of businesses should be accompanied by marketing activities. That is identification of market service, assessment of the competitor environment and segment, but only 52% of SMEs have their marketing departments. In order to gain new markets, innovation activities are needed, because innovations contribute to the development dynamics in a average in middle term perspective, but almost half of SMEs do not carry out any innovation activities. Thus, we can state that besides the willingness to go to bigger markets, the capacity to do this is rather limited. The capacity to go to bigger markets is also driven by the environment or by past activities of the enterprises. Assessment of the general business climate in the past and the current situation is rather moderate. Nevertheless, this considerable drop in business operations is accompanied by big expectations. Some SMEs plan to increase their business activities. But there are some threats and obstacles which will prevent entrepreneurs from implementing the expectations, like unfavorable economic situation in the country, lack of financial resources, and complicated general tax system. These are major points which require additional efforts from the state. We need stabilization in financial market and simplification of tax administration for SMEs, for micro enterprises. Thank you. Thank you, Artur. The portrait is not complete, but we tried to look at the quality characteristics and SMEs development, and unfortunately we do not have many such evaluations of the quality of SMEs, and which prevents us from a formulation of well-grounded public policy. With this, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andriy Butin, who will discuss expert activities of SMEs. We keep speaking about export. Recently, we have signed a free trade agreement with Canada, and now we need to understand what is the situation of SMEs in external market of Ukraine. 6.5% of SMEs believe that they are export and exporters. By the way, the percentage is different, and if you look at the the chart on the bottom of the page, you will see that Chernivtsi, Zakarpattia, Kyiv are leaders, and also 11% in Zaporizhia, in Vinnytsia and Kharkiv. These are 10% of SMEs carrying out of export activities. Then we asked a question about difficulties with export activities. So 30% of respondents mentioned about the difficulties with each separate export operation. When SMEs come to the customs service point, they are unable to predict how much time it will take. This is very negative fact. For counter regions, for their counterparts in other countries, our SMEs become unpredictable. They cannot predict the length of export operations. Also, geopolitical factor influences negatively. We have limitations on supplies to Russia, and 26% mentioned this was a problem. And problems with getting licenses, high customs services, and difficulties with the customs clearance procedure. Then we have formed the exporters index. This is a it derives from the business environment against the a background of procedures, export procedure this year. This year we observed 12% growth, and 50% stated that nothing changed from 2012. 15% stated that the situation worsened. So these three factors contributed to the major index on business, on export activity. We try to understand how long the customs clearance take time. Majority of people mentioned 2 days. This amounts to 1,727 hryvnia, and 6.8% confessed that they paid bribes to customs for customs clearance. How often do SMEs export? They export to 2 countries in average, and not more than 16 export operations per year, which means 4 export operations per quarter. What are the destinations for our export 50.3 to CIS countries, and 30% to Russian Federation. So considerable part of SMEs export to Russian Federation, and 49% export to the EU countries, to Germany, mainly to Germany and Poland. So this was the portrait of exporter. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, dear colleagues. Let's finalize our presentational part. And to sum up our presentations, I would like to draw attention to 3 points. The first is that situation with the regulatory climate and with SMEs development differs from the general perception in society. We should not mention about treason. We should not speak about the defeats. We should be more correct here. The biggest problems are regulatory climate, which is responsibility of the state, and the state has to make some decisions. But at the same time, we should speak about the quality of SMEs, about the qualification of people who work there, and for their readiness to develop as business entities. Quite often speaking about the state, about the government, we say that the government is operating badly. But when we come to the prices, we reveal that they cannot offer goods and services at a good price. And also the third, my point, the business climate assessment should not be the product of LEV program. It should become the instrument of the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Economy. This measuring this annual surveys are carried out by many countries, and it should become the instrument of those ministers. I wanted to show you this brochure. Of course, we are unhappy with the hard copies. That's why you can find this report on LEV website, in Facebook, and on the website of Institute of Political Consultations. All the time we say annual business climate assessment. Ми не можемо знайти, and we cannot find the Ukrainian equivalent. That's why we would like to announce a competition for the shortest Ukrainian term for this English abbreviation of APECA. So now let's start our Q&A session. Do you wish, please don't forget to mention your name.
Good afternoon, Andriy, NGO Dixie Group. You told about high interest rates, and are they really that high compared with the taxes in Germany or France or other countries? Thank you. So all the data we present here is assessment and feelings of entrepreneurs, and we believe that this is a difference of our research from other research. And everything is done for people, and the target group are entrepreneurs. If they feel changes, so the change happened, and if they don't feel, it means something is wrong. And as to taxes, firstly, taxes are considered usually as high, And I would like to point out that more painful it is for legal persons than physical persons, and it proves that here is not only a subjective factor is present, but there is real assessment of situation. So business believes so. And here we may add administering, and this is even more important than taxes. Thank you. And before the next question, I would like to say that many of our respondents, they have the feeling that taxes are believed to be high, and administering of taxes is also difficult, and they say that they have high barrier. So, RBK Ukraine, Natalia. So maybe this is a preview to doing business. The question to Oksana: if business says that there are high taxes and a lot of accountability, maybe they wanted to decrease taxes, or maybe to simplify customs procedure. And question to Artur about simplified system of taxation. Maybe you asked small and medium-sized business, maybe there should be some limitations in the system, and what will be the influence on business, because IMF wants to reform the system, but the government doesn't do it. As to doing business, I want to say that Igor told us at the beginning that our research is the assessment. We can speak a lot about doing business. This is a very good rating that shows that the place of the country in comparison with other countries, but we see the progress of the countries country in rating of doing business 2012, 2013, but businessmen didn't feel these improvements. That's why for us this is important addition to look at the situation from other side. So the feelings of entrepreneurs, the feelings of business, and this is what we propose and what we are going to do annually, and we hope that this practice will continue. Also about the documents of accountability. So we said that this is the number of products. We show it as a portrait, but maybe the business says what should be changed, what rate should be changed. As to the rates of taxes, I would be careful about it when we are speaking about rates, because maybe the next research next year will show the effect from the decrease of single social contribution. We will see it in a year. And as to administering of taxes, the business says that we want that the system be simple, and it shouldn't be changed every day. It shouldn't be changed every 3 quarters of the year. And there is an example. In order to be registered as physical person entrepreneur, there is a special form. It has a heading. I asked to register, and so on and so forth. So now it is written that I asked to register me in this registry. So if the person brings the outdated form, this document is not accepted. And we can provide many such examples. So maybe this is not a major problem, but this is a rather big problem actually, and the business people tell about this. As to simplified system of taxation, we didn't have such an issue. What would happen if simplified system of taxation was cancelled? So recently analytical work was published, and it identified the influence on simplified system of administering to business and how much it cost, and the system is the form of state support. And relatively, this help costs several percent of GDP, and evident is the answer whether the entrepreneurs want to cancel it. It is evident that they want to preserve the system. And we saw it last year, but the government wants. The government wants to do it, but whether they can do it is the question. As to simplified system, several times in my presentation I stated that problems of the overall system and problems with administering, they are more important for legal persons and more important for physical persons, entrepreneurs. But micro enterprises, the smallest enterprises and physical, they are more vulnerable. And taking into account all the minuses and all the problems that are created by the simplified system, it solves the main issues. This is the umbrella that covers small business that can be vulnerable to unfavorable regulation, and I believe that it is needed now. Also, I would like to add the topic is really difficult in the sense that this system and its existence, it reflects some attitude from the side of business, from the politicians, and I only want to add on Facebook of program and on Facebook of the Institute, we wrote our position. Our statement has 3 points. System should be preserved, taken into account, and we say why it should be done so. Then we said that the change of the system should be carried out in the framework and in the context of the change of the overall system of taxation, because usually they separate the issues, but this is a system. So, and thirdly, we were speaking about is we should introduce into the policy, the regulation, such rules that would prevent problems. It sounds idealistic, but we shouldn't run in circles. So bad bureaucrats take bad decisions, and then they adopt bad regulations. So this is running around a circle, and there are no good results. That's why, for us, this is important direction of the policy to introduce some specific rules, and this rules of the policy. Each time regulation is adopted, it should, as we believe, should be verified under 3 criteria. First, whether it influences and how it influences small and medium-sized business, and this is envisaged by the legislation, but this is not done in the context of Act on Small Business of the European Union, or whether this regulation influences expert, and we know that Ukraine is dependent on expert in good sense of this word, and there is 3rd criteria we are not speaking about, and this is the issue connected, how this regulation influences the situation with the monopoly or not monopoly of the market, and while taking the decision we should look at these rules, and maybe there will be less problems Oksana told us about. So the change of 2 phrases creates new wave of documents. So when the seals, the need of the seals was cancelled for small and medium-sized business, it revealed the fact that the mentioning of these seals, there were mentioning of these seals in 14,000 or 15,000 of documents. So please, I will add several words on experts. So I was asked what are the documents that prevent activity. So the main is that the business person cannot forecast while exporting some goods. Not something new, but the products he know about, but he doesn't know about the consequences. If we are speaking about licensing, maybe terms should be of the issue should be shortened, or the type of activity this license is provided for, and how the business feels in the complex. So this is the main idea of our research. So we do not want to go into detail, but if they say that I can supply, but I cannot forecast the consequences, this is the main. So we should make conclusions out of it. I would like to use this opportunity. The topic of expert and trade is my professional topic, and I would like to explain to you it in more detail if we are speaking about consequences. What is this problem with regulation when we provide a package of document to the customs office, to fiscal service or other structures, then each time we can get other result for the same package. They, for example, do not accept, or they ask for additional information. So this is the key problem. Problem is not in separate paper, but the system works in such a way. So it creates obstacles for small and medium-sized business, and it creates obstacles for our international partners. Many people who are ready to invest in Ukraine, even in the context of war, they just are afraid of our bureaucratic system, and for them doing business works in this country, it is done automatically, and in that country it is done with problems. I have 100 million. Why should I put it in the country where problems exist and political risks exist, comparing with the countries that do not have such risks? So nothing personal, just to business. So we have several minutes, and if you have some questions, please ask. Maybe it should be the last question. Please be brief. Safronova, in this research, you presented an average portrait of Ukrainian exporter 2015. So maybe you have information and can answer the question. So the portrait of this exporter, did it change dramatically? Does the situation improve for them, or the things remain the same? Who can answer? I would say about the portrait. Next portrait will be in the first quarter of the next year, and we will see whether it changed. I don't believe it will change dramatically, because the assessment as to the number of those who export and our other assessment that we carry out through different methods, they show the same indicators from 8 till 14%, or according to the 79%. As to the problems we face, Andriy told us about it, comparing. We take 3 years, and the problems will decrease connected with the procedures, but they remain. But we may say more or less problems, but we have problems connected with import. There are more such problems than, for example, at customs. I understood that it is all. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your questions. We are ready to answer them off records. So please help us to find good name, and we exhausted our intellectual potential in this. So I would like to address to the representatives of those who hear us online. Please go to our sites. We have many different interesting documents, and I believe that this research is interesting and also very practical. And often we say how we should do policy, and we just have wishful thinking sometimes, but we should take real steps. We should say in what way we should do it and how we should do it. And the last thing I wanted to say, today we had a very interesting argument that as to the issue of the predictability of Ukrainian legislation. Well, you are asking and you take some, hold some events in parliament and the cabinet ministers. So some politicians say that the country needs such decision, we should take it and then we will correct it and we'll adapt this decision because the situation is bad. But when we adopt the decision that should be corrected and added or edited or cancelled in this way, we create unpredictability and those political problems that small and medium-sized business complains about. Thank you.